history where they've lived. All these things are happening very quickly.
The
To
old
them,
stuff.
yeah. The other element, we send up just traditional kind of KVA questions, which, what was your first car, all these types of things, which people are used to seeing.
Yeah,
But we have, but we have another layer of software that actually can tell if the person's lying or not, depending on how they're moving, the kinetic movements. Someone that's reading off a page or trying to recall versus just knowing what your first car is moves much differently.
Yeah.
The time is different.
And let me get into that.
Yeah, let me just finish this
Sure.
piece, and then, so we take this as 1 to 2 minutes. If that person passes the test, they pass with a very high accuracy. We can tell if this is the person they say they are. We store that person in block drive, which is their identity. So we secure that identity, which can't be manipulated. Very difficult, as you know, to get to hack or change anything. So that's how we've taken it about. And essentially, we're taking this test to various industries. Banking is probably where our biggest opportunities are, and that we're involved with already 6 big financial institutions today. And then the US government is really after this technology, because I don't know if you have friends, but I have friends that actually their tax returns have been filed for them. And I know multiple people, so this is very prevalent, and they're very interested in trying to head this off. It's kind of low-hanging fruit. I have friends in the gold industry that are dealing with this. Anywhere you're dealing with transactions, you're not seeing the person face to face. We've got to counter that somehow, and we need tools to do that. So this is it's a burgeoning industry, and this is one element of how we're using blockchain for this.
Yeah, so think about it this way too. What I was going to say in the visa waiver service that I did with all the agencies in the U.S. government, considering these requests by other countries. You know, a rich businessman can go into Cayman Islands and buy a passport. It's perfectly legal, nothing wrong. They put whatever information they want. The magical point at which this occurs is at the point in time where you have a biometric and you have your PI data. You have to objectively prove those things belong together at that moment in time. And when at that moment in time we accomplish that, we drop it into blockchain to make it immutable. That's not been done till now. All the data plays you have and checking your iPhone of the movements, there's some cool stuff out there, don't get me wrong. But all that can go away, dropping cookies on you, doing GPS on you. It comes with this secondary data. There's an algorithm. The first algorithm that I was familiar with and got me going on this was a professor out of Padova University in Italy created an ability to that when you're on a device or your keyboard, everybody types or handles their device or keyboard a certain way. It's your own signature, if you will. What we came up with was this other CEO. Yeah, well, no, that's your patterns, which you might suspect. What we came up with is a second invention. The secret sauce is an algorithm that you lay over it. Once you're baseline in that first minute of the test, the next 2 or 3 minutes, minute or two, is we see when we throw questions asking you about you that maybe you only know. We can see how your kinetic movements change to indicate that you're being deceptive, right? So what does this do for you? All you have to do is be honest about who you are, and then you can push back on all those risks that corporations are taking with your data. The right to be forgotten is ridiculous. If you go to a corporation and say, I want to be forgotten, they can't go out, like, let's take a big bank that I was working with in Australia. They have 10,000 databases out there. And if you go to them, they can't even tell you, the CEO can't tell you at a given day or end of the quarter exactly how much money is going through the veins of that bank. There's 10,000 databases. He had 900 data scientists. And they all have their favorite data warehouses to go to. So he can go to every 900 of them and give them each the same task, and they all come back with a different financial number. Your identities within banks, it's the same way. You've got little pieces of your information floating around, and if you don't have what we're introducing is called ground truth. And this is even more important for neural networks, because neural networks is just a layer after layer. If you're off a half a degree here and you go through 1 million layers of a neural network system, where are you going to be? You're going to be in outer space with outcomes. And think about it from a marketing business standpoint. We're trying to focus on our customers in a customer or citizen-centric place. So this, when we can tell with over 90% accuracy that you're being deceptive, because your brain goes back, reaches back, and it's a cognitive load if you're in the creation mode. The creative experience creates a cognitive mode. And if you're just recalling something, you go back and you're out with it. If you are in the creative mode, aka lying, that can be affirmed now to Our market contender is one of the big dogs at 34% accuracy. We're at 91 just with this one algorithm portion of the test. Then we throw some AI-driven KVAs at you. We add in the biometrics, and Bayesian theorem says we're at 99.9999%. That's ground truth. If you're talking philosophy, you're talking neural networks, you've got to have a starting point you all agree on. And what I told Equifax, for example, I said, if you're going to have a portfolio on somebody, you're not going to invest in something if you don't don't know who that person is. Find out who that person is, and then start tying things to that person that makes sense. And I consult with banks on what's going on in Europe now with the authorized information provider stuff to make it real time into, some of these banks and industries are going to be disintermediated if they don't understand the foundational pieces that they need to do a blockchain. So when we drop our solution in blockchain, this is a real life problem for me. I'm in Mexico City and I'm talking to the organized crime unit chief down there because we're doing this case and we've already got 1 million phone records in the first ever FBI system. It's called telephone coins, which I loaded stuff in manually as a newbie agent. And I'm down in Mexico talking to the Attorney General's designee. He runs and is threatened by the cartels all the time. In fact, called me the other day. But when I give him all this information that I have to drag out through the system, the Department of Justice, through State Department, I give him a piece of paper with a ribbon and a stamp, and it goes to them. Then somebody hand carries it to a bank to get the account information out of. The reality of that situation, the SME experience of that workflow is, how do I know the cartel isn't holding a gun to the head of the CEO of the bank to make sure we don't get that information? Or subscribers' information about that telephone. Chapo, it was interesting when he controlled northern Mexico.
How we doing on time real quick? I want to make sure I try to fit in a couple of questions.
Yeah,
we
okay?
okay?
Chapo had his own, and I haven't told this publicly, he's in jail now. Chapo had his own server to run all of Mexico. Government couldn't give us that information. And even if we got it, we wouldn't know who it was. So think about Facebook. I can be a terrorist and go online and create how many versions of myself, and Facebook can't shut it down. I've got over 100 use cases. But opening up bank accounts, little Susie comes in, 10-year-old, says, Mommy, I want to go on the internet. Well, why don't you can't go to the darknet, of course, and the internet's pretty dangerous. Why don't you go to that new thing called trust.net or whatever it be called, and because you've taken that test, and everybody in that space has agreed to take this test once, and I might not know who you are, but we've all agreed there's a trusted third party out there who does. So when the law comes, they know that that IP address was established by somebody who actually took and scientifically proved themselves who they were, and you can't hide it. And you don't build all this technical debt where all the friction happens and where people can take your information and bastardize it and do things that just aren't.
Thanks. Thank you. How are we doing on time? Yeah. Oh, okay. We got a little bit of time. You want to open up for a few questions?
Any questions about anything I said? There's, yes.
Sure. When we're talking fraud, there's always the incentive there as the reason why people are committing the fraud.
Yes.
Do you think it's going to be easier to remove some of those incentives through the use of blockchain, or is it going to be easier to incentivize the good actors in the space?
Yeah, let me hit that first. You're
Sure.
the CEO king here. Blockchain to me is like, I remember the first time I heard email. We were handing Inmarsat telephone companies to companies we created in Mexico, working with the cartel people, saying, take this phone, nobody's going to hear you. Because we had to parallel those lines, right? What do you do with something? Then I heard blockchain, right, as not an FBI agent. And that's like the perfect money laundering scheme. Somebody was saying in the lesson before, so the banks and this and that, everybody using the U.S. dollar is under subject to U.S. laws. So I don't care what country you're in, it's a real problem. But what I say is, if people want to make Bitcoin really work, blockchain really work for, say, Bitcoin and that kind of thing, they have to have a trusted third party. Normally today, when we say trusted third party, we're talking the banking industry, the healthcare industry, we're talking credit bureaus, the big ones, right? make a blockchain of a blockchain of a blockchain to have a trusted third party hold that information that only gives it out when a federal judge says, I want that. Right? So you can actually control it. You actually know what it is, you know who you are, you know what's your data, they know who you are, more importantly, and they have to associate that set of data to you. So I think we could have a very, now granted, if you're from the skinny jean generation, which I am not, and I'm not even skinny anymore, I used to be, but if you're in the skinny jean generation, you just, so much roses out there, but I'm pretty cynical. And like an earlier gentleman said today, it's really a lot about money. And so, yeah, blockchain and Bitcoin and that stuff will work, but the government, two things I know about for sure, my cynicism, death and taxes. They're going to have their taxes. They're going to get their bite. They own the power, right? And I was the man, right? So I tell you what's really scary. I really scared people, not introducing myself, knocking on the door and introducing myself as an FBI agent. When I was with somebody who's an IRS agent and let that IRS agent introduce themselves, that really scared people. You know. So yes, blockchain, there's a place for it. Bitcoin's great, but you can do all this other thing, but to make that little jump to where I can scientifically prove who opened up that digital account, because everything's a digital account now, your Facebook account, your JCPenney account, all that. To make that jump, I ask you who you are, and I depend on something that you can't cheat with me on. And I can do it in 2 minutes. You know, that's where we are and what we can do today. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, we're just making that much more difficult for anyone to try to get to the system. I mean, for them to kind of see an identity in our system, they'd have to solve, for example, a 250 character encryption key, you know, T1234, 2,256 times. So that versus a traditional database is just much different, right? We're just making it that much harder, and I think Dan can speak to it. Criminals are looking for the easy way and not the hardest way. And we're just making it that much more difficult for them.
Like if I give you a string of numbers, alphanumeric numbers, characters, that's your fingerprint today. That's when you get stopped by a cop on the street and they query the system, they get this number and it's associated with your PII information. What Harry's talking about is it's not 16 alphanumeric, it's hundreds of it. And that's what makes this good, is because now you have the power that when I did this presentation and when it was an idea, before we had done any competitions or won anything or sold anything, I had a woman in the front row scared the heck out of me. I had about a 15-minute presentation, and she's ACAM certified, so she is who the bank hires to go through their whole process and lead their process. And there was 160 of bank workers, anti-money launderers in the room, and she screamed at me, "You just stop money laundering." Because in this kind of crime, people care about being known who they are. Who's here? Have you heard of the Panama Papers? Anyone? The Panama Papers? So the law firm, the boutique law firm down there, they did, if you paid a lot of money, they did for the wealthy what you can do now at home. In my home state, I go online, I create a subsidiary for $53, and then I make a subsidiary of a subsidiary of a subsidiary. And now that I lived in a world...
layers of LLCs, essentially.
Just layers of LLCs. I'm telling you, it stumps everything. Don't forget the TV. That's a manual problem. It's a mushroom of information. Now, if I'm looking at a person that does that, and they admit, say, 5 companies, and there's 15 people in each company, it's 5 times 15 times all the databases I need to query, and then I got to make some evaluative judgment. So that sets people back here. So for almost nothing, right? I can pretend like I'm the Prince of Wales or whomever, that all those names that came out. Mossack Fonseca, I think, was a law firm down there that did that. And by the way, I was in Noriega's Oval Office looking for money laundering documents about 3 weeks after the Marines took them to where they needed to be for a while.
Identity validation would change that. Identity validation would change that.
Yes, it would. Yeah. It's just be honest about my ask, and I know this is true. Just all your responsibility to individually say who you are. After that, let the chips fall where they may. Fight like hell, not let the government or anybody else have your information. I don't have Facebook. I don't trust Facebook. I work for a big corporation in my day job, multiple of them now in the 10 years, a couple of the biggest data company and the biggest IT company on the planet for 100 years. I understand what makes people tick, And I worked in 35 countries, and I understand how the ball bounces when things have to get done. And this is the surefire way to protect yourself, is to be, and what it does for the voter. I was talking to a colleague, if I may, a colleague in Nairobi, Kenya. He was a PhD in an IBM laboratory, and I said, he started laughing when I explained this to him. He started laughing. I said, "What? I know why you're laughing." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Now all the people in Nairobi, Kenya can vote. Because if you've been in a third world country, when it's vote time, they may say they're a democracy. When you go up there and the guy's got a machine gun, he looks at your national ID card and he says, 'Hey, line, get out of line.' You're going to argue about that? You don't got any shoes on your feet. You're not going to like go into Taekwondo kickboxing with a guy with a American provided M16 around his shoulder, cocked and loaded, ready to go." So we can get people to vote. And banking, they mentioned being able to bank people. You come out of a favela in Brazil where I've been down there. You go into a bank, see how hard it is to open up a checking account. We can solve those problems because now you can say, "Oh, here's my QR code, UN approved. This is who I am. I just took that test for 2 minutes." So.
Yeah, thanks. Any, yeah, please.
Just for clarification, who's the direct customer here with the organizations?
Organizations, yeah, I mean, the US government is in those agencies and banks and particular companies that are dealing with fraud, or organizations that want to counter fraud.
So his reference to IRS fraud, in 2016, the IRS lost $450 million or so, 469, whatever it was, to people who filled out. That's what they tell us. I've been there. I'm telling you, it's 3 times that.
Yeah.
But
the numbers in fraud, the numbers are always
like
a lot higher.
healthcare. You're in healthcare, I think you said, right? And what are the numbers now in fraud? When I was there, it was 300 billion a year in fraud. Yeah, and there's insurance. There's fraud there. Like I say, I've got over 100 use cases, but in the IRS use case, what happens is, if you get a refund, they say, "Hey, Dan, you just got $3,000 back this year for your, click here, take this test, and we'll send that check to you so you can cash it." I can't pass a check about who I am. Should they send me a $3,000 check? Should I endanger all the other taxpayers? You know, I mean,
The problem right now they're
can't say
dealing
who I am.
with, there was a rule where it came in essentially where they have to get the payments out so fast, and it's like they can't even keep up. They're just pumping payments out, and they're not catching it for months. So this is a way to solve it.
George Bush was lobbied by the healthcare pharmacists for Part D for payment to be, after it passed, Part D passed. He was lobbied by the healthcare industry. "Hey, we got to get these payments faster." So now you're in a pay and chase model, and you never get your money back once you're not paid. There's no careful data analytics, blah, blah, blah. So if people will, sack it up, and just say, "Hey, I'm who I am," and just own it, let that be the standard. After that, fight like hell. And I usually, when I give a presentation like this, I say, "Anybody in the room an attorney?" And you always get a few. There's probably an attorney or two in the room here, maybe. But I say, "Look, if you can come up with a reason why legally we can't do what I'm saying, to where we can't ask people to tell us who they are and expect a righteous answer, then I'm buying your dinner. And with your significant other, we'll do that."